It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Priscilla Simon.
Priscilla Simon has the day off. She's at the 710 Cup. I'm Radical Russ with the headline news. For the first time, monthly pot sales have declined in Colorado. For the month of May, state sales of recreational marijuana came in at $21 million, $1 million less than the figure for April. Officials believe the interest in the April 20th 420 holiday boosted sales for that month, marking the first time in history any government has recognized the economic impact of marijuana culture. May accounted for $5.7 million in taxes and fees from recreational pot, contributing to the overall $34.9 million collected since legal sales began in January. Yesterday, state regulators pegged the annual demand for marijuana at 130 metric tons per year at an average price of $220 per ounce. Well, yeah, I'm not surprised that we see a decline from April to May, but a decline of $1 million is not that much of a decline, really. It's a less than 5% decline. It seems to me that April is just going to be naturally a month that gets a spike to it, and that we ought to consider the numbers for March versus the numbers for May. And if we do, then we will see that marijuana continues to rise in Colorado. And this estimate of 130 metric tons per year, a much greater estimate than has ever been assumed for the state of Colorado, because they'd always assumed based on surveys where people are, one, likely to underreport what they're using, and two, maybe not even have any idea how much they're using. We discussed this yesterday. I mean, how do you know how much you're putting in the bowl? Is it 0.3 of a gram? Is it 0.2 of a gram? Most people that I know do their estimates of how much marijuana they smoke based on the time between buying a bag, right? So if they bought an ounce and it lasted, 4 weeks, then they can say, I use about this much per day or whatever. So that's going to be kind of not a very accurate way of sampling. They had previously thought about 60 million tons. Then they thought about 90 million tons. Turns out to be 130 metric tons a year. That's 130 million grams a year. And they're selling those ounces at $220 an ounce, which is good news for the people that are still reeling from the high Washington prices. But I think we'll continue to see the sales go up in Colorado, and we'll also continue to see the price come down. That's something else that's not considered here when they talk about how much has been sold. Those initial prices in Colorado in January and February were higher prices than they are now that they've got some of the supply worked out. So it's even a greater amount that is sold. I would like to see some figures on how many grams are being sold per month and whether or not that is continuing to increase. Retail marijuana stores in Washington state are still facing shortages of marijuana. Chad Champagne, owner of 420 Carpenter in Lacey, said, quote, "No matter how you cut it, there's just not enough product to go around to all the stores opening. If I could get 1,000 pounds, I would get it," end quote. Top Shelf Cannabis in Bellingham opened with the most product in stock Tuesday, more than 20 pounds from 3 separate processors. And even it is in jeopardy of running out, said manager Sigrid Williams. Top Shelf had about 7 to 8 pounds left Wednesday afternoon, said employees. The marijuana deficit should come as no surprise to pot retailers, said Greg Stewart, CEO of 9 Point Growth Industries, one of the state's licensed growers. Stewart says he's fielded up 10 calls a day from retailers looking for product, and he's had to turn them down, leading to an inevitable conclusion, quote, "Everybody kind of knows that we're going to run out," end quote, he said. Well, there's no reason they should have to run out. There are plenty of people in Washington state that want to grow weed and want to sell it to these pot shops. This is a bureaucratic problem with the Washington State Liquor Control Board not getting enough of these growers licensed quickly enough and not having enough staff to do it. And again, part of that was because of underestimation. The previous story talked about underestimating the amount of demand in Colorado. They did the same thing in Washington state, and they did their estimates of how much canopy should be allowed to be grown statewide. They wanted to grow enough to take out about 25% of the black market, but not so much that there'd be diversion. And this unnatural way of trying to control how much supply of a weed there is going to be is going to keep those prices artificially high for the next month or so. But in Washington State here, when Top Shelf comes in with 20 pounds on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, they've got a third of that left, there are bound to be pot shops that won't have any product over the weekend just after the announcement of these pot stores opening. We sure hope the supply issues get fixed in Washington State as soon as possible, and we will continue to keep you informed from our viewpoint just south of the Evergreen State. The marijuana movement is pushing back against politicians who obstruct legalization. While marijuana lobbyists once were content to play nice in their media messaging, the new ads reflect a confrontational style aimed at exposing records and getting elected leaders to board the pot legalization bandwagon or at least get out of the way. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton is already under pressure to side with her husband, former President Bill Clinton, who reversed course last week by saying states should be allowed to legalize without federal interference. When Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz voted against a bill to defund DEA raids on medical marijuana, Americans for Safe Access ran a series of 30-second television ads in South Florida calling her out of touch. In Washington State, Americans for Safe Access ran 2 ads, one praising Congressman Doc Hastings for backing the bill and another criticizing Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers for opposing it. Earlier this year, the pro-legalization group Marijuana Policy Project ran ads against 2 Democratic governors, Mark Dayton of Minnesota and Andrew Cuomo of New York, urging them to back medical marijuana bills. Yeah, of course, the bad turnout of the Dayton and Cuomo pressure is we ended up with bills in those states where you're not allowed to have marijuana. Well, so I guess, hardball tactics are great, but shouldn't your hardball tactics get you some better bills than a non-plant medical marijuana bill? Still, it's good to see these ads coming out, especially against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And this is important if you're following national politics. She's a Democrat from Florida, but she's also the head of the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the Democrats' basic fundraising and strategy arm to win seats in the House and the Senate. Well, the congressional side. So, she is the leader of that group, and she was one of only 18 Democrats who voted against ending DEA raids in the medical marijuana state. She's always been very retrograde on her positions on cannabis, medical or recreational. So to attack someone who's such a bigwig in the Democratic fundraising apparatus is huge. And Alan St. Pierre from Normal was actually quoted in one of these pieces I read about how 2016 is going to be the year where marijuana legalization gets more than just a passing nod in the campaign. It's going to be a major issue. After, when we hit to 2016, we're going to have 4 legalized states and the nation's capital having voted on legalization. We're going to have Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Alaska, and Washington, D.C. Florida will have become a medical marijuana state. We'll have 24, possibly 25 medical marijuana states. We could have half the country or more that are medical marijuana states by the time we get to the 2016 election cycle. You're damn well better bet they're going to be talking a whole lot about this issue. A Washington State man who was the first person in Spokane to buy legal recreational marijuana this week and then said he was fired over the resulting media coverage got his job back Thursday, and the company in question called the whole affair a misunderstanding. Michael Boyer, age 30, said he was ordered to take a drug test Tuesday by his part-time employer, temp agency True Blue Labor Ready, after he was seen on news reports being the first customer in the city to buy legal weed under the new law. Quote, "We were not aware that he had taken the day off. He was scheduled to work. We saw him on TV that he was under the influence, and that caused us to start a process of screening," end quote, True Blue Vice President of Communications Stacy Burke told NBC News. She continued, quote, "When we realized that he was not on assignment, we reinstated him. Pot is legal, and we know that," end quote. Boyer said he doesn't harbor any ill will toward the company. It was widely and falsely reported by other news outlets that he had also been fired from a second job, Kodiak Security Services, but that dealt with regulations getting a guard card and had nothing to do with legal pot sales, he said. Well, I don't know about this temp agency. Sounds like they're doing a quick, back step because they don't want to be known as the guys that, drug test just because you're seen being a marijuana consumer. And I can tell you, I worked for a lot of temp agencies over the years, and that was one of the reasons I worked for them, is that they weren't drug testing. They would drug test you for cause. If you were showing up high or, there was a complaint, you smelled like weed or whatever, sure, you might get a drug test. But there was no pre-employment drug test, primarily because they wouldn't be able to stay in business. That's part of the temp underground second-class employee system that we've got in America, is that, you don't get any benefits, you don't get any vacation, you don't get any of that kind of perks, but at least we don't ask for a cup of your pee. So it would have been bad PR for this temp company to basically set the precedent that if you're known to be a pot smoker, if you're seen being a legal pot smoker going into one of these marijuana stores, that you would be targeted for termination. So it's just one more way that we're seeing the pressure of legalization come to bear on our culture, on our employers, and pretty soon they're all going to have to understand that you cannot discriminate against someone just because they have been a marijuana consumer. An ordinance approved by the Berkeley City Council says that at least 2% of all pot carried by medical marijuana dispensaries must be provided at no cost to very low-income individuals and families. The council defines very low income as individuals making $32,000 a year or less, or families of 4 collectively earning $46,000 a year or less. And unlike the cliched image of government cheese, the ordinance further stipulates that the free marijuana, quote, shall be the same quality on average as medical cannabis that is dispensed to other members, end quote. According to Weed Maps, 1 gram of medical marijuana sells for an average of $15, while an ounce of high-grade pot can cost upwards of $400. Berkeley residents who want to qualify for the free pot must also submit a federal income tax return or other reliable method approved by the city manager in order to prove that they meet the minimal income requirements. Free weed! There's Danny Danko when you need him. This is great news for medical marijuana patients, and it's always been kind of a quandary of the medical system, that in a medical system, the prices are going to be unnaturally high because there still exists prohibition, right? There still exists the need to separate the patients from the criminals. So your pot ends up being exorbitantly priced. And the whole point of medical marijuana is we got people that are disabled or sick who are unable to work, or for whom, the insurance, if they do have work, isn't going to cover the cost of marijuana, right? So, someone can be working poor and still have this issue. We're going to go to our phone lines now, where I think we've got Priscilla on the line. Is that you, Priscilla? Hello, 720 area code. You're on the air.
Oh, wait, hold on. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, I have to take this.
Hello, Priscilla. Are you there?
Hello?
Hello, Priscilla.
Oh, hi.
Hi there.
Oh, my gosh, dude. Same thing. 7/10/2013 all over again, dude. It's fucking raining cats and dogs.
I was at that cup, and you called me 7:10 at 4:20. We're gonna have to shut this down for just a second here, so hold on. We're gonna keep you on the line. But happy 420 to you at the 710 Cup. So you say it's a raining downpour right now?
Oh, shit, dude. I cannot fucking hear anything.
How about now? Are we better? Can you hear me okay?